Over 80% of mothers say there's career trade-off when they become mothers. And this is not good. I'll show you how others overcome this feeling by backing themselves. And later on, why the quality of clothes got worse. Hi, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, my name's John. I've had 40 years in the wool industry, 20 years on farm and 20 years as a public accountant, looking at the intrinsic decision making that wool growers make. Today I interview a farmer whose favourite native plant is a water reed to keep his water clean for his sheep, and what changes he made to be happy. Tim, what is just changing the topic or changing the direction, what is your favourite native plant and why?
Okay. Well, luckily you gave me the opportunity to read this question before, gave me some time to think about it. I would naturally lean towards all these beautiful plants that are out there with lovely blossoms, such as yellow box trees or whatever. But after a bit of thought on this process, I would have to say the plant that most amazes me is kabungi, the reeds that live in our rivers and water streams. It's the most amazing plant. It slows the water down in all the gullies. It grows up to 2 metres high.
Do you know what its native name is?
I'm sure the Aboriginals called it kabungi, and they used to break the base off, and they used to eat the base of it.
Right.
And I think they said it used to taste a bit like onion.
Right.
I've seen the Aboriginals. Well, I know the television showing how they used to use it as food source. But it's a really good way. It does a great job of filtering water. It's filtering all the sediment out of water, and it's high in minerals to my knowledge. And I know on my place here, it's in a few of my dams, and the dams it grows around the edges of, the water is that crystal clear you can drink it. And it's I think it's a phenomenal plant.
So it's a water reed, and it's called kabungi. That's the local name anyway.
Yeah, that's the local name.
Right.
It's just like a big water rush.
Okay. Let's just discuss your neighbours. So most people have neighbours about 4 or 5 metres away from them in the houses in the suburbs, but yours would be 400 or 500 metres, if not further. So how many neighbours do you have? How often do you see them? And how important are they to you and your business?
Right. I would have, off the top of my head, probably about half a dozen neighbours, I would think. Six. Let's say 6 would be close enough.
Yep.
And my closest one is my cousin, actually, who lives up the road. He's about 2 kilometres away.
Mm-hmm. How often do you see all your... Yeah?
Not all that often. We might, if we drive to town, you might drive past his entrance, and if he's around, you might have a wave. But we are involved in community things around this area together, so we see each other in those sort of in that frame. But no, we don't have.
Yeah. So at the back, how often do you see them?
Very rarely.
Once every twice a year?
Twice a year.
Right.
Twice a year. And that's usually not on the boundary fence. Sometimes, maybe once on the boundary fence a year. The rest of the time would be when you run into them in town.
In town, yeah. Yeah. And how important are your neighbours to you in running maintaining a healthy, viable business?
Well, they are quite important because obviously you share a common boundary. And if you can have a good neighbour who is more than happy to help to maintain that boundary, it can be quite advantageous to both parties. Whereas I have got one neighbour on one side of my place, which he's an absentee neighbour, and look, we get on quite well. He's a lovely fella, but the fact of the matter is he has no farming experience and has no understanding of all the work that's required just to maintain these fences with all the wildlife that damages them. And because they're there, even when they're there, they really have no knowledge. You've got to basically share the load, to carry the whole load, and it can be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, and for listeners living in suburbia, with a boundary, you need the native animals, wombats, kangaroos, and pigs do put holes in the fence that they that they go through, and then also which transport diseases and also seeds of weeds and all those sort of things. So if you've got a good neighbour and maintain a good boundary, it does reduce the movement of diseases and seed and feral seeds and all those sort of things.
Yeah, no, that's definitely correct. Yeah, no, and just to, even the diseases on your livestock, be it lice or whatever, the stock are moving from one property to another. They're just carrying all those, and they're just more cost, it's just more expense because you've got to use whatever you've got to use to control these problems.
And lice on sheep is just like head lice that we used to have when we were children. They're just itchy things. But they are detrimental to the health of the animal. Okay, so looking back, do you think you chose the right vacation, the right job?
Yes, I do. I'm just awfully relieved that I was able to get involved in this regen side of the farming, because if I had a regenerative farming principles using this. Because if I had stuck to traditional way of farming, I think by now I would have probably lost my way and lost my desire to keep going, because I just can't see any great future in that form of farming, because it's not really, in my opinion, very sustainable. Whereas, yes, as I mentioned before, we're using these principles. I can see my property improving, as in nature improving, which is just as important as my profitability. So that gives me incentive to, and I do think I really enjoy what I do.
So making money is important financially, though also being happy in what you're doing is also important. So my point being, so it's a balance, I suppose. So this is a question. For you to make a decision, would it be 80% based on financial profitability and 20% based on what you personally believe, or what? Right. Could you break it down like that?
I don't think it'd be. Sadly, if you speak to my wife, it's certainly not 80% financial, because I know I could do a lot of different things and probably make short-term gains financially. So it's probably more like a 50-50 at best. I would think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you spend money today that will benefit you in 5 to 10 years' time, or you believe, from what your knowledge is, you believe will benefit you in 5 to 10 years' time.
Or even longer away.
Or even longer. And now some farm facts. And that's what Australia rode on the sheep's back. They were the good old days. And now to Hayley Ray on the quality of clothing and why has it got so bad?
We can all collectively agree that our clothing quality is a lot worse than it was many, many years ago. Across the board, it just feels like things are very thin and flimsy, and the construction really isn't that great. Things are pilling more easily. And one of the results of all this declining quality is that consumers are treating clothes like disposable items, as opposed to pieces that should really have a long lifespan within their closet. I wanted to look into this further to better understand why this is the case and all of the nuances around it. So today I'm going to be sharing with you everything that I've found about why the quality of our clothes has gone downhill so much over recent decades, and talk about what you can actually do about it. I'm a huge believer that at the consumer level, there is so much that you can do to avoid lower quality items and help build a wardrobe that will last you a very long time. The first thing I recommend is that you need to train yourself to recognize quality. For me, this first started with understanding the difference between fabrics and choosing which fabrics I want to prioritize. So I, especially going to the thrift store, was able to get a better understanding of what's synthetic and what's natural. Of course, you can always look at the care tag, but I do think it's really important to actually feel the fabric and get a better understanding of how it's actually going to perform in a comfort manner. Like, is it going to feel good on your skin, etc. So when you are shopping, I encourage you to examine the fabric and also examine the construction of the item. Inspect things like the seams. Are they tightly stitched, or are they kind of loose and fraying a little bit? Does the fabric feel substantial? Like, can you feel the weight in it? Can you feel the actual quality of it? or does it feel just kind of thin and flimsy? You essentially want to interview the item to make sure it's going to have a long-lasting spot within your closet. The next thing I want to mention is that repairing is always an option. Things like small holes or loose buttons or buttons that maybe fell off, or a broken zipper, or just a small tear does not automatically mean that item is at the end of its life. I remember when I first moved to college, my mom got me a small sewing kit, and I still use it to this day. Now, of course, these things aren't happening super often, but I actually do have about 2 or 3 items in a pile in my closet right now that I have to sew up or I have to change the buttons on. So I'm just waiting for some time to actually sit down and do it. But I think the moral of the story is that teach yourself how to sew. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. If you have a small tear in your clothes or in a t-shirt or something, you can go on YouTube and just look up a very basic video teaching you how to mend the item. I'm not saying you have to become a seamstress. I'm not saying you have to go buy a sewing machine. A thread and a needle really go a long way. And if that's not your expertise or you don't have the time, whatever the case may be, you can always bring your items to a tailor. Now, of course, that costs a little bit of money, but I've personally found that things like changing a zipper or fixing a button, it's quite affordable, of course, depending on who you are, where you live, and what your definition of affordability is. But you have options here. So just remember that repairing is always an option. But if there is anything that you guys want me to expand further on, or any other topics you want me to do a video on, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm always open to ideas. I especially love these research style videos. It helps me learn more. It helps you learn more. It's a win-win. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I am so appreciative of your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks, Hayley. So the key takeaway is when changes occur, it's up to us to adapt and seek out quality for the better of our life. So just like Tim, Australia rode on the sheep's back, or Hayley, you get out your sewing kit and make amend to better your life. Remember, life's short. Find your joy. Always remember it so you always enjoy. Thank you.